Okay, when we first open Photoshop, this is what we see. What we need to make sure of, we've got lots of menus, top on the left hand side, but this over on the right hand side is called the palettes. We want to make sure we've got enough palettes open that we want to use on a regular basis. And the ones I suggest that we add, if you open up the window here, you can see all the different palettes that are on offer. History is a really good one to use, and I'll talk to you about history in a minute. And I can join that up by dragging it till it goes blue. So I've got history in there as well, and I'm going to add one called layers. Now these are the main ones that I work with on a regular basis. Okay, so first thing we need to do is to actually open up some pictures that we can work with. There's a few ways of doing that. The first way is just to simply double click anywhere in this dark grey area. There's some photos. I'm going to choose maybe 2 of these, and I'm going to click open. And you'll notice that what happens is it places them into separate tabs within this view, and I can flick between them. Whichever tab is active is the one that I'm actually working on. Another way of opening is just to go to File and Open, and I'm going to choose another one here. We'll go for this perfume as well. So I've got 3 of them open. Okay, before we go any further, we'll look at saving. So basically, if I go to File and I choose Save As, I have lots of different options down here under what type of file it is. Now at the moment it's a JPEG, which is a type of image. Usually what I want to do is I want to save it as a Photoshop file, which is here, PSD. And if I save it as that one, basically what happens is I can save lots of features of what I do. So you'll see in a minute if I add things like text to it. If I come up to the text feature here and I choose to add some text, and I type the name of the dog in. Now on my text here, when I ticked that and said yeah, that's all good, you'll see now I've got an extra layer. So in Photoshop itself, every time I put a new item onto the page, so if I put a new image on top of this one again, it will create a new layer for it. So in the Photoshop format, layers stack on top of each other. When you turn this into just a simple photograph or a simple image like a JPEG or a PNG or something like that, all of this layer data is just squished into one layer. So saving as a Photoshop file is much better because you can do more with it. I could close this file, come back later, and I could go back in again. If I decided that this text needed to be edited, maybe it needs to be bigger or it needed to be a different color or something like that, I can edit all of those things as I go along. When I'm happy, I click the tick. You always need to watch out at the top right here to see if there's a tick. If there's a tick, it means it's waiting for you to say, yes, that's okay. Now again, if I didn't want this on there, I could just take the eye off over here, and although it's still available, it's not showing. Clicking the eye puts it back again. Clicking on the move tool will allow me to choose this and move it somewhere else, so I could actually put it somewhere different on the page if I chose to. Okay, I'm going to take that off for a moment. What might be worth looking at is the size of the image. So if I come up to image and choose image size, I get some information. So it's telling me that the width of my photo is 3008 pixels wide. Now if you bear in mind that a laptop screen is something like 1280 pixels across, this is more than twice the width of your screen. Now we're going to come back to this image size box in a moment, but let me explain to you about this. So at the bottom we're looking at 25%. That means the view of the page we're looking at is only a quarter of the actual size. So if I come over to the magnifying glass and double click it, that's what my picture looks like in full screen size. This is the size it is for real. It's on 100%. Now using zoom is a really useful thing to do. Something that works really well with zoom is holding down the space bar. Now if you watch what happens to my mouse cursor when I hold down the space bar, it turns into a hand. And I can actually move that hand around now. So I'm going to actually put that back to a smaller size. So I'm going to stay on my zoom. You can see my zoom's on plus. Now when it's on plus, I can do 2 things. I can either drag and I can zoom in that way, or I can drag outwards. So all I'm doing is moving from left to right, and you can see the plus and the minus on that zoom magnifying glass changes as I do it. If I hold down my Alt button, it also turns into a minus. So clicking on the Alt makes it zoom this way, and clicking on the plus makes it zoom in bigger. So that's a really useful thing to be able to work with, and we're going to do that later on. Okay, going back to the image size, I'm going to go back to the image size box. If I decided that my picture at 3008 was way too big, I wanted to make it smaller, I can do what's called resampling. So quite often when you're putting work into documents, you don't need them to be as big as this because it's just way too big and it takes up more memory size. If I highlighted this and I changed it to something like 1000 and then clicked OK, all it's done is resize my picture. Now that's still on 25%, so if I double click my magnifying glass, that's what it's like on full size. So it's still high quality and it's still a good picture, but it's basically gone to a much smaller size, so it's easier to deal with. Generally speaking, you want to leave the picture as big as you can until you're ready to actually finish it, and then that's the best time to resample. So I'm actually going to show you now something useful, which is called the history panel. Now the history panel tells me all the things I've done to that picture. So you can see this last one says image size. So if I wished I hadn't done that, I can just step back one step and it's taken that thing away. So if I go back to image size and check, it's back to 3008. Okay, if I step back through this way, it would take all those features away that has been done. So I've no longer got the word written on it and so on. I'm going to put this back to a decent size so I can see it, and I'm going to use my spacebar to move it around. And the next thing I'm going to have a little look at is something called cropping. This is the cropping tool. So if I decided all I really wanted was the picture of my dog, then I can click on this one and I can drag. And once I've dragged this around, it puts a little box about it. I can move my picture inside the box, or I can move the handles on my box. And you'll see at the same time as it does this, at the top I've got a tick. When I'm happy with my cropping boundary, I click on the tick and it makes that my picture. So if I now went in and I went to my image size and I checked, you can see now it's much smaller because I've got rid of all that extra bit around the outsides of it.